Hello friends and welcome. Come on in and make yourself at home. My name is Julia and in this video I will make a couple of art journal pages with Lavinia Stamps. I'm using my small art journal from Dylusions and the ruler from Dylusions to make a curved edge in the middle page, and I just love all this real estate I have to work with now. I have a few Lavinia stamps myself, but these gorgeous houses come from, you guessed it, my friend Linda. She sent me a huge box for Christmas and I'm still using and being inspired by the things she sent from her stash. I stamp in archival black soot a few times to get a good crisp impression on watercolor paper. And then I start stamping the mushrooms, the flowers and toadstool houses, and as usual I stamp many of each to have options later. To you who know me, it doesn't come as a surprise that I'm going for a whimsical vibe, and who wouldn't when Lavinia stamps have such a magical vibe. So, let's make a magical background. I'm using Catherine Pooler's ink, and they aren't even sold here in Sweden where I live, but I found a woman selling them on second hand. She gave me a great price, and now I will put these vibrant dye inks to the test. Dye inks are vibrant and sink into the paper fast, so you want to use a light hand, and when you get a sharp edge, more ink is your savior. I'm starting with Limoncello and I blend it in over all four of the pages. I'm going for an evening sky, so my next color is Tiki Torch, and I go back and forth between the yellow and the orange. Next I use Prom Dress and I blend that beautiful pink, overlapping the colors and going between the pink and the orange for a smooth blend. Last but not least, I blend the purple Grape Crush at the top and blending it in with the pink until I'm happy with my evening sky. But even if your blend is not to your liking, this trick is a great one. I have a spray bottle with water and perfect pearls mixed in, and when I spray my background and lift that color with a paper towel, I am left with shimmering splashes all over my background, and my mistakes are just a faint memory. I give my background a quick dry before I move on to coloring my images, and for that I have chosen a few Arteza Real Brush watercolor markers in vibrant colors, and I will stick to those colors throughout this video. Starting with 3 shades of pink, I color my flowers with the lightest pink first and bring in the middle tone from the bottom. Next, I bring in the darkest from the bottom too and blend it out with the lightest pink and a water brush. For the mushrooms, I chose 3 shades of blue, and I do the same procedure going from light to dark and back to the lightest blue. And if I color over the spots, I don't care, because I can always use a white gel pen to make them white again later. For the base of this beautiful house, I use a light bluish grey and 2 darker greys for my shadows, and leaving those small stones white. And I do the same for both floors of this house, putting darker shadows under the roof, in corners and around the windows. For the magical roof, I use 3 purple shades, starting again with the lightest and working my way to the darker shades and blending it out with my lightest again. For the windows and door, I use 2 brown markers, filling in the wooden windows with a light brown and making shadows with the darker. Then I use the 2 darker greys to color in those stones in the middle. I fill in the door with my lightest brown and use the darker for shadows. Coloring these houses is so much fun, and I start the second house door with the blue markers from before. Then I bring in that light bluish grey for the walls and the darker greys to make shadows under the roof and in corners. I use the two darkest grey for the stones around the door, and then I bring in the pink markers from the flowers to color that cute heart hanging from the roof. I use grey markers for every other stripe on the roof, and for the stripes between, I use the purple markers from the other house. On the roof, I place my shadows coming in from the sides. I use the same pink markers to fill in the swirls on the roof of my tall house. It's time to color some more flowers, and to make them match my background, I choose 3 shades of yellow, starting with the lightest and bringing in the darker yellows from the base. For the cute toadstool houses, I use the same pink shades as before on the top of the toadstools, and for the stem I use the same yellow shades as I used on the flowers. Finally, I bring in the same brown markers to color those small windows. Now, let's get back to our background, and I have used masking paper and scissors to cut out the grass I want covering the ground, and masking off the rest of the background from that black silhouette grass. I'm using a bone folder to burnish that masking paper onto my pages, and then I use foam and that black midnight ink, and I fill in the grass along all of my pages. Since I don't want that black ink anywhere else, I am careful, and when I pull back the mask, I have a grass line grounding my images. At one point, my mask tears, but I leave the torn piece where it is and fill in all of the grass before I use my tweezers to pull off that last piece of mask. Next up, I want the light on in my fairy houses, and I use a yellow gel pen to fill in some light in all of the windows. As I always do, I use that black midnight ink, and I go around all of my edges to frame these pages and the magical scene. Next, I'm using a stamp set from Heroarts, and I only use that flower. I put it on an acrylic block and stamp it here and there to fill in my pages with that flower's silhouette. Now, let's glue down all of my images. I start with the mushrooms, flowers, and then I glue down the houses, so the flowers and mushrooms doesn't take up space in front of those beautiful houses. I use a paper towel to press down my images and catch any glue oozing out. I purposely leave a little room on the middle pages because I have a few more things up my sleeve. I snip off any of the flowers hanging off my page, and then it's time for those wild hares. I stamp my hairs in Versafine Onyx Black Ink and cover them in Wow's clear matte dull embossing powder and heat set until melted. I use my anti-static bag to get rid of any other tackiness than my stamped images, and when I get a bad impression that is easily fixed with a paintbrush, and I use that to fill in my hair with that onyx black ink and cover it with the same clear embossing powder. Now I feel we must have some fairies on my scenes, and I will use these mini fairies. I stamp them in Versamark clear embossing ink and cover them with Wow's vintage champagne embossing powder to make them sparkle and stand out on my evening scene. When I have my fairies on those first pages, I bring out Rangers Holographic embossing powder and what is called Fairy Orbs. I stamp the orbs in Versamark embossing ink and cover them with that holographic powder. And as soon as I tilt my journal, the light hits the orbs and they are visible for a magical moment. I stamp a lot of orbs, big ones, medium ones, and many small orbs, imagining that my fairies are playing and tossing those orbs back and forth. When I'm done with the stamping on those first pages, I bring out those fairies again, and I stamp a few of those on the last 2 pages. I use the same vintage champagne embossing powder from Wow, and when I have my fairies, I do the same as before, stamping lots and lots of orbs and covering them with that holographic embossing powder. The last detail on those art journal pages are a sentiment, and I use one from the Heroarts stamp set that says, "Leave a little sparkle wherever you go." I stamp on black cardstock and cover my sentiment in Wow's vanilla white embossing powder. I trim down the sentiment to fit in the first left corner, and with that, these mixed media magical art journal pages are finished. Thank you to each and every one of you who watches my videos. You mean the world to me, and I cherish every new and old subscriber, as well as all your comments. Until the next time, see you soon.